When we're talking about all these ecosystems, I didn't really have to pose the questions because we naturally hit a little bit of everything.
I think the smart thing to do is to ask a lot of questions. Do you want who's going to be using this and what for?
When most new technology comes out, there's a hype curve.
How do you catch up and educate all the users of what that data was intended for, what they can and cannot use it for?
We do have quite a few different scanning and survey technologies and drone programs. We know that we need partners to be able to help us with the big burden of implementation.
But what happens now is we can start to anticipate needs. You can quickly start to communicate and storytell better.
The industry's growing, the scanning needs are growing, modeling is growing, so everybody wants to know what team should we be investing in building.
At the end of the day, optimizing specs, building out the right specs is only going to get better data for all of us, which is going to be more truth. It means more time for us to trust. More trust from us means more time to actually go spend out there and do more, capture more.
We're excited to be back for our second panel. So the first one, we talked a lot about company culture and leadership, and I think things that at the higher level we need to think about in order to get to the technical. This is our first one that is digging into the technical. So it is a broad, obviously the topics of reality capture, digital twin, XR, and AI. That's very broad, guys.
So you just grab like buzzwords.
I asked ChatGPT, give me all the buzzwords, and no, I didn't. But the goal is we have a diverse panel, which again, we'll go through introductions, but the goal is to talk about where are we at with this current ecosystem, right? So many technologies, we're trying to figure out how we capture things, how we model things. We'll talk about what is digital twin again a little bit. We always do that. Maybe it changes every year. I don't know. The XR piece we can still touch on. I know several people up here have experience. John was going to moderate this panel as well. And with him being a part of the AR/VR Association, there was going to be some XR twists there, but I took over moderating since he couldn't be here. So, all right, with that, let's start with introductions. We'll start here and make our way down, and let's give not just name, title, but also a little bit about your role and,
Yeah, for sure. My name's Kyle Daughtry. I was talking a little bit earlier on today. I work at ExxonMobil. I've been there for about 17 or 18 years. A bunch of technical and digital roles over that period of time. The most recent, we've been building out this ecosystem of digital twins, digital reality, XR, all of it. You grab buzzword soup, that's us. And I'm the digital or discovery and strategy manager for what's called DRE inside of our organization. But what that means for us is I'm setting the strategy for where we're going with each one of these particular items. So
awesome. So
nice to meet y'all.
Glad you'll be able to explain them all for us. Okay.
Nope. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Mariana Jimenez. I'm the Director of Laser Scanning and Scan Modeling at E&G. We're a BIM company with more than 500 BIM professionals. Our core services are MEP modeling and coordination for prefab and pre-construction. My background is in architecture, project management, and BIM management, and I'm originally from Argentina.
Awesome. Thank you.
My name is Dustin Ridley. I work for DPR Construction, Southwest Region VDC leader. Lead a team about 40 VDC professionals, and been with DPR for about 6 years, but been in the industry for 20 on the design, trade, and GC side. So it's been kind of a journey for me in terms of what I'm working on, the problems I'm trying to solve, the people I'm working with, and the technology that I'm using. But I think my role now, I'm starting to feel is a little bit more nebulous, and it's more of a mentor role, a coach, influencer, problem solver, listening, trainer, so all the above. And so I'm very much enjoying it.
I'm Kelly Watt, consulting company called Digital Twin Consulting. Work on a variety of projects, oil and gas, a little bit energy, and my biggest contract's with a major airport, DFW Airport. Been there about 2.5 years, leading the roadmaps and basically the vision for the airport. Touches reality capture, BIM modeling, IoT, XR, AI, and other technologies, which is kind of fun. My background was in LiDAR, worked as a global leader for Faro, worked with Trimble Navigation and background in telecommunications before that.
Hello, I'm Bray Tucker, and I'm with Tucker Technology Consulting. And so I started off as a skyscraper architect, and now I kind of do everything from BIM to digital twin. I had an AI company for a little while before I went into full-time consulting. So I'm really actually interested in all of these topics and kind of like specific ways and how they touch the built world. And what I do with my clients is find projects where we have digital strategies to try to make some of those things real.
Thanks, Bray. My name is Megan Stethledge. I'm with a company called Virum. Virum is a reality-first visual operations platform. And I have a really fun job of working with our clients around the world to, implement strategy for deploying and standing up digital twins and scaling them out across their operations.
I'm Paul Doherty. I'm an architect, real estate developer with a group called the DigiGroup, and we're responsible for procuring, designing, and delivering smart cities around the world. So when you start talking about all these different terms, yeah, man, it's amazing to see over time how these definitions change depending on what your role is throughout these life cycle approaches. So yeah, looking forward to the conversation.
And Paul didn't mention that he made Revit.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, okay, we'll just
forget that.
Yeah, that could be a whole panel, maybe. So, awesome. Well, I think we picked the right people because most of you said you do all the things. So I'm just going to listen to you talk. No, let's start with, let's hit one at a time a little bit, right? So let's start with reality capture. We talk about it a lot. There's rapid change happening with all of these technologies. So let's talk a little bit about where we see the technology right now being implemented. I think we're going from the phase of, and I know we've talked about it a lot, several years ago, people weren't really asking for it. Now we have major organizations that it's becoming a cornerstone for like the vision of how they will use data in the future. So I'd love to just hear a little bit of conversation around the current state of reality capture getting integrated to built environment.
I can start on that. I think we're at such a critical time in the industry right now because many, I don't think anyone here can refute the fact that all owners and operators across the industry are consistently looking for ways to add efficiencies to their current work processes, whether it's, cost savings, more production, better safety, reporting, whatever it is. And historically, I think the problem has been that they've been searching for solutions to some of these problems within the confines of their existing processes or procedures. And that's really limiting in how much impact you can have. So there seems to be so much more adoption these days because industry is really seeing that it's so critical to leverage the technology and innovation that is out there in the industry. It's growing so fast. There's so much that's becoming available. And as you start to leverage these and start implementing them and taking that risk, that's when you start to see those, impactful returns on some of those key goals that we're seeing in operations.
Yeah, just to piggyback on top of that, we've taken this journey over probably 6 to 10 years. And if you go back even 6 years ago, the cost proposition to be able to go to scale across this was not there. It was hard to do. Mm-hmm. And really our whole remit across what we're trying to do in our program for Dre is to go to a cost minus proposition. Mm-hmm. We're really on that cusp now within the past 3 years or so. I think we like to say that, the cost to do this work decreased by 10x over the last 3 to 5 years. Mm-hmm. And that is true. I mean, it's real life. It allows us to actually start capturing reality and show it to people as reality versus having to go through a large process in the background to be able to make it work.
Yeah. And I think one of the benefits of that, often people look at the technology changing and becoming faster and easier and cheaper, and they get afraid that oh my gosh, we're not going to have enough projects because we're going to scan them so fast. But in all reality, it just lets us actually capture more because it wasn't possible to capture all facilities before in the owner side, right? Yes. It was, okay, we can't afford to do the whole facility. Let's just get the one tank we have to replace. Now it's, okay, we can actually capture all of it in a reasonable time frame. How do we now use all that data even more?
Yeah, so more frequently.
Exactly.
You do it over a period of time, so we keep it ever now. And
Yep.
Absolutely.
And I think that alongside that, 90% of the total data that exists in the world today was created just within the last 2 years. So that trend totally speaks to the fact that the cost is coming down, it's becoming more accessible, more available. So how do we really put that data to work for our organization?
It's interesting. We've forgotten about this thing, COVID, that happened a few years ago. And I think it was quite an accelerator of, being put in a position where we need to work remotely and work with visualization. I think that was a real awakening for a lot of organizations that were forced into that position to do that. But I think that we kind of forget that impact that happened on us. And I think it was a big force that it's not always a technology change. Sometimes it's other shifts in the market.
True.
And also with all that data that's being created, how do you trust it? One of the big problems that we have with every one of those points, the reality capture, the digital twins, especially AI, because it seems like, everything has AI all of a sudden, right? Is what is the quality level of what I'm getting? Because the standards are not being followed or they don't exist, especially with reality capture. So yeah, I can go in and scan a building, but what am I benchmarking that against? And that's my biggest problem right now, besides not having enough people to work, is trusting the data.
Or blindly trusting the data and not knowing better that you should. And that leading into projects where the modeling effort will be inaccurate as well. So yeah, the importance of standards of governance is absolutely paramount right now.
And I think the thing that's interesting too is that, while we have all of these other factors for companies getting more data becoming more cost effective to procure, the ways in which we can generate data are also changing. So especially in the context of reality capture, you can kind of just take like a snapshot every 5 or every 10 years, and you have entirely different ways of doing things. So right now, if you're not investing time to just at least understand how Gaussian splats or NeRFs work, those can be fundamentally useful depending on how you're going to fit it into a broader data capture program. And so I think there's things like that we're continually getting different ways that we can process information, smarter algorithms, like we're still finding better ways of just doing the raw math. So I think, all of those technological advancements just continue. And I think some of those are so revolutionary, it really should cause a company to think about digital strategy at a deeper level to say, how are we going to leverage things like this when all we really need is a cell phone and a cell phone camera? So I think there's some things like that too, where there are now newer opportunities. And I think that has to be a part of any organization's conversations, just around like, how are we leveraging things that are cheap to get? How are we leveraging things that are more expensive? And then how are we packaging all of that together to be whatever our digital backbone is? And I think that's where the standards and like all of the different ideas come together of how does your company make use of that data?
Yeah, it's the kind of double-edged sword too, right? As you get new technology, Paul, like you were saying, how do I trust it? And not being able to have all governance across all those assets. I got a new modality that comes out every week. It feels like Gaussian splats today could be something else tomorrow. And then how do I know what to trust? Is it down to a grade of accuracy that I need? There's a lot of questions that are becoming a little bit of burdens on us, which is a good thing because we're trying to keep up with the technology at the same time. But also, it's moving a little faster than the governance for actually being able to maintain what is the truth of that data.
So you bring up an interesting point there, in which, in some ways, from a constructor standpoint, we're having to take a slight step backwards to talk more about the use cases, because as you pointed out, as the technology becomes more frequent and the vendors providing it become more numerous and it's changing quickly, what we need to be careful about is what the actual use case is meant for versus talking about the technology. I know Josh Stefano and I talk about this all the time, to speak more about the use case rather than the tech, because where it gets challenging is you may have a circumstance where someone on a project wants something, and it can go like this. They can reach out and say, hey, I need a laser scan of our project. And we say, okay, we reach out, we ask questions, we dig a little deeper, and then we're like, oh, they really want a virtual tour with a Matterport, not a laser scan. So I think education around, as this technology is evolving and the terminologies get more nebulous and confusing and numerous, there needs to be considerable effort on the education around the use cases. Otherwise, we're going to have crossed wires all over the place, and it'll still be incredibly difficult to implement at the constructor level. So there's a lot of effort that needs to go into that.
I completely agree, Dustin. Like, as you know, some organizations are scaling across their asset portfolios and have upwards of 4,000 users. How do you catch up and educate all the users of what that data was intended for, what they can and cannot use it for? Because if there's considerable risk there that if, some of your users or groups are leveraging that data for use cases that it wasn't, perhaps intended for, then you're opening yourself up to risks that, the adoption is going to be slowed or the trust is going to lag, and then you're, working backwards. So
yeah, it's hard to always get that information and data too, like of did I lose trust in that user or not?
Yeah.
Like sometimes they're not going to come back and tell you. They just lost trust and said, I'm going to move on.
just not log back in.
And not log back in.
We try and simplify it by stating one thing. No matter what you're doing, EPC, oil and gas, if you're doing buildings, infrastructure, there's design intent that we have to communicate with the constructor. That's as simple as it is. The cool thing about reality capture is that you can quickly start to communicate and storytell better, right? Then you can refine it by digital twinning it, depending on what maturity level you want to get into. If you want to get into the XR stuff, which sometimes it makes me sick with my Oculus. I've had 2 13-year-old boys, and they're always on this thing. And I
Playing Beat Saber.
it's like they're up for like an hour. I'm like every 2 minutes, I'm like, and then you throw AI on top of it, especially the, if you want training wheels, use GPT. If you want to be real, it's agents, right? That's really where things start to mature. I don't want to be building on a house of cards. So getting back to how you have these geometries that can help that better sell a story, I go back to CAD. CAD was an electronic pencil that took a 2D abstract for a 3D environment. People are still using Revit today and pushing out blueprints, plans in 2D. It's like, you were better at AutoCAD, get the hell off Revit. So at the end of the day, if we're really into capturing the environment to tell a story, that's like level 1. How we then do that, and then your expertise of who you're hiring, if it's outsourced, I'm getting better results by having my own people use it instead of going third party right now, because it's all new.
Yeah, and I think the hybrid approach is really the right way to go, because if you have internal resources that are doing some of the work, you become intimately knowledgeable and you understand the boundaries of the technology. So at DFW, we do have quite a few different scanning and survey technologies and drone programs, but we know our capabilities, and we know that we need partners to be able to help us with the big burden of implementation of these large projects. So I think the hybrid approach is great. And even with the 360 imagery, I hired a team of 6 full-time survey crew to just do Matterport scans. And we have over 1,000 scans, and that's our change management process. But it's a very low cost with a low skilled person that we can internalize. And then again, that just becomes, it breeds the culture of using the technology instead of contracting it for a specific purpose one time here and there.
Yeah, it's actually interesting. We've been shifting a lot to that early phase part, like the POC pilot, into internal, mainly to learn a lot more, right? Learn and understand it, so then we can actually set the right guardrails and guidance for our contracting companies to come in. Where we move towards scale when we go to a globally scalable service model for sure. But that triggered a thing in my head that's actually been really beneficial for us over the past couple of years is get some really smart people internally. Maybe it's not up to scale across a global enterprise, but at least they'll understand what the technology is, what it can't do, and no BS whenever BS is there.
Yeah, but don't you find the smart people?
I told them you're saving the world.
So you actually brought up a really good point about what I heard was cost of tech versus labor utilization in my mind. And one thing I think will become more problematic as tech gets more advanced is ensuring that the cost is reasonable. In sometimes where we find ourselves is there may be a tech that comes out that may leverage AI or automation or et cetera. And then we have to ask the question, well, can we just pay this person to do it manually for half the cost and achieve relatively the same results? So how do we get this more advanced tech that makes us not want to use that more manual labor method to relatively achieve the same thing? That's something that we're really up against right now, trying to manage and vocalize to our vendors out there.
Well, but we shouldn't be implementing technology to implement technology. It has to be a sizable problem. So the technology investment must outweigh that problem. Or we need to dig a little deeper, understand the other ways we can use it. So it's not a single purpose, a single utility, because there's different ways, there are different stakeholders in the organization that can use that data different ways. But I agree with you that the keeping the focus on the business case, why we're doing it, will allow it to have the longevity. Otherwise, we're just implementing shiny objects.
But I think that's the thing with when most new technology comes out, there's like a hype curve that is associated with it.
Yeah.
And that just taking it back to Paul's point just a moment ago about how BIM was accepted as a concept and then how software like Revit came out that gave a way for people to utilize BIM as that concept. And then we still pumped out sheets. And then American Institute of Architects even did a study comparing buildings delivered in the late 80s to buildings delivered in the mid O's. And what they found was the buildings in the O's were actually delivered at a worse coordination because they had more sheets. So it was just like, it was physically a bigger problem to coordinate the product. And so, some people can talk about that just being like legal, scope creep or things like that. But at the end of the day, if the technology made something easier for you to do, you probably did it. And so I think that's the thing that often happens, and it's going to happen with AI for sure. One of my favorite memes right now is someone using ChatGPT to write a really long email. It's like, oh, look at how smart I look. And it's like, that is the dumbest way to use that technology. The smart way to use that technology is like, wow, someone just sent me this stupid long email. I'm going to feed that to ChatGPT and then get the talking points out of it. So it's just like, there are things like that where like there's an intelligent use case, and like getting people who are embracing your technology to be like, hey, this is the smart reason for why we're going to use this thing. And you need that like top to bottom. Yeah. And I think it's a hard thing with every new technology hype curve.
You get back and forth in this AI battle between each other. The person writing the email, the person reading the email, just going back.
Well, I use it the opposite way. I love taking the transcriptions to meetings I miss, simply summarize, give me the talking points and actions. And it's like, it's amazing how, it can summarize something. There's always a little bit of, mistakes there that you got to correct, but it's pretty impressive. And, we're implementing Copilot with different manuals and whatnot, and now looking at, other types of information that we get from our meetings or our trainings and starting to feed more and more of that in, just slowly, iteratively, right? Yeah. But I mean, it's just amazing how fast it returns answers, and just the amount of time it would take to research and read and find that information is just incredible.
Bray, I really love the point that you made, is like always bringing it back to the why. Why are we implementing these technologies? And when you think about it at a super high level and getting out of the nuts and bolts of all these very critical use cases that are actually paying for the technology, but when you bring it to the foundation, why are we doing this? Well, it's kind of astonishing to think of the fact that like we are 3D creatures. We, our brains process visual data 60,000 times faster than anything that's on text. We retain that 400% longer. We're designed to live, learn, and work in 3D. And we've been operating off of 1D, 2D, siloed sets of information, in perpetuity. And so really bringing it to how can we leverage the technology that now is available to us to allow our workforces, our brains, everything to operate the way it was designed.
2D is great for lawyers because it's all about interpretation, right? And what we found, and this is a real use case, we stumbled into using 3D because I thought it'd be really cool. I was working in the Bronx, putting up a school, and most of my subs were Spanish speaking. So I took AutoCAD and we did a translate all into Spanish. I thought I was a genius. These people couldn't read or write, so it didn't matter what language you had to that. So what we did was we took Revit, and what we did was we created these little MP4s based on the work for that day for those trades. And they could download it onto their phone, and they saw what they had to do. So again, that communication is really important.
Context.
We kind of stumbled into it. So now we're actually looking at it as, well, what happens now if we can start to anticipate needs, especially the schedule? And this is where AI, to your point, takes care of the mundane so that we can focus on the stuff that's important, right? So it's a really fun time to experiment. So we digitized Changi Airport. We should really talk, because I think there's a good benchmark marking exercise. And what we did was we actually created our models, and then we started to take a lot of the content of IoT, occupancy sensors, CCTV cameras, all these different things. And what AI showed us was anticipating the needs of passengers, anticipating the needs of weather, all of these things that would have taken months to actually go and do. And now you can actually start seeing it. Now, do we get hallucinations? Oh, yeah. I mean, the hallucinations I've had, I think they come out of Woodstock. But it gets us about 60 to 70% there, which is much better than trying to do it from scratch and wasting all that money.
So you mentioned something there about 2D, 3D, that really got me thinking about back in my time on the trade side. I was integrated into a design electrical model. We're sharing the same space, one model approach. And there was a period of time where I remember we went back and forth on this entire project so many times on how the sheet needed to look for the city permit review. And that's always been on my mind since that point forward, of how much of the way we design and package and put together this information for regulatory agencies and different permitting drawings that need to be reviewed. And makes me wonder, like, how much of the industry is focused on bringing them along so that we can maybe change the way that we approach that. That's a little bit more efficient.
Authorities having jurisdiction is the bane of our existence right now.
Right.
They're much needed for safety and all that other stuff. But the thing is, you're exactly right. Mrs. McGillicuddy on, Podunk, wherever, is not going to get onto a Revit model. Yeah, that's why you still have to print out in 2D, because that's what they understand.
Well, it's not even just that. Some information is easier to consume from a mapping infrastructure. I look at Esri and how successful they've been as an organization. When you have big physical areas and you want to be able to spatially see, but then to drill down into open and 3D, like that's where the opportunity really is. If you're looking city scale, you're looking at utilities across the state, then I'll wander around in a 3D jungle, like it would be too much. So I think it depends on the macro size of the information, even in some of your plants, right?
Yeah,
I mean, just huge amounts of information, and especially if you're mapping that over a country, right? So I think there's an element of both, but I think the detail you get out of 3D, especially reality capture, because it's a forensically created exhibit. It's not something that we humanly create and we omit certain things and it's human errors. We can trust what it is when it was captured as it was captured. It maybe not from an accuracy perspective, but from a visual perspective. That's really why I love reality capture, is you can communicate all the little nuances and color and aspects of what we see as humans, right?
Yeah, I think there's a really interesting part there on that I think what we really need to do is make 3D more human, right? Like, so the interaction with it, that's where standards comes in, where interoperability comes in, the platforms. How do you touch, feel, interact? Because it absolutely is. It's the highest form of context that we could have. But we're like tinkering around on it by like touching, and then sometimes it's swiping right, left for using a mouse for a keyboard, or the interaction methodologies for it are a little bit less human, right? So you've got this really amazing, beautiful interface, and then you're kind of...
And that's where the gaming platforms are really changing the game from the clumsy BIM models and kind of trying to navigate and find and turn on and off layers, but be able to physically be like you're in that environment,
right?
You're immersive in that environment. But you're right, it's the navigation, it's the naturalness of being in that environment. Same with AR and VR. I get sick when I use those headsets too. Surprisingly, that Argyle solution, I put it on, I'm like, this is pretty good. It's pretty stable, right? Like, I don't feel like I'm getting sick. So the technology is
Argyle, pay him $20, please.
There you go. No, it's serious. I mean, it's just the technology is progressing. It's getting...
So, Kyle, you just raised up something, and it's something that my friend Kimona Numa, an architect out in California, and I are working on. He's had a contract with the community college system of California for years. He introduced CAD there. He introduced BIM. He's introduced IoT to manage all those campuses. And in facility management operations, the reality capture piece has always been a forensic exercise.
Right.
But they started to use it during construction. Yeah. So that their medical facilities, like what DPR has been doing for years, you start to see what's in behind the wall. So if you're going to be putting up something, you're not knocking into like an oxygen, like whatever. But then we went one step further during COVID because we were freaking bored. We figured out that, Siri on the, and Alexa on the Echo platform, those are smart speakers. And we went, what would happen if we could actually put personalities, humanize the buildings, and tie it into building management systems and building automation systems? So this past June at the Building Innovation Conference in Washington, D.C. With the National Institute of Building Sciences, we actually had buildings calling us on the phone live.
Wow. So
the personalities were, if you have a storage facility, that's like an introvert, right? Not much stuff happens in that. But a high-performance lab, that's like a valley girl. Oh my God. Like a bunch of people.
That were stereotypes.
I'm here to stereotypes.
This is scary.
Oh, no.
And then the classrooms were like a stuffy old British guy with a British accent. So we tied into the facility management system. Building number 2 at the Petaluma campus called us during the conference, and it said, I'm building number 2 up on the second floor. I'm feeling a little ill. Could you change the air filter? When we start to have personalities like that and humanize it, that changes our relationship with the built environment.
It's no longer a building.
That's an ecosystem.
Yeah.
So carrying on to that, and just one more share here in the spirit of humanizing and reality capture and gaming. I had a recent interaction with a teacher at a school. We were doing an all-day workshop with students. I think we went through like 300 students that day. And what I brought with me was Unreal Engine, in which we flew one of our projects and captured the job site, created a mesh out of it, and then we worked with Unreal Engine to put a semi-truck in it to be able to drive this thing around freely. Free logistic play is what we're calling it, so that we can explore the semi-truck in the real-time mesh, so that we can see if there's any pinch points with the roadways. And so I brought this whole thing with me and executed it. And the high school students, I was like, AWSD, like, you know what to do. And they're like right on it. And usually I don't get the teachers involved with it, but I had this older teacher, and I convinced her to get on this thing. And I, showed her the keyboard, and then I went and talked to the other students. I came back and she was still on it, and I couldn't get her off of her. And it was just like, wow, if this teacher, who's probably close to retirement, is really enjoying this and doesn't want to get off of this, imagine the impact of like gamifying logistics and merging that with reality.
So you got her hooked like crack. So this is
It was impressive.
But we bring up gamification. And gamification, things become entertaining and they become engaging as opposed to homework. So, I mean, even going through our cybersecurity training at work, which is usually something that would just be mind-numbingly boring, but the program they put together was actually pretty good and pretty funny, and it was like breeze through it, But I mean, taking content and making it interesting, like back to personalization and engagement level that you get with content, and that's what we can do with these environments. I think really fascinating how you're putting personalities on buildings, right? But I mean, the opportunities are there today.
But I think maybe like one way to maybe round off this question, talking about like where AI is and like kind of how that fits into gamifying things that are like kind of reality capture centric pieces in the industry. Like my hot take right now is, if you're thinking AI is coming and it's going to start writing code for you and it's going to make things easier, you are wildly wrong. The world is going to get just more complex. And I think the thing that's so interesting about AI that a lot of people are missing is that it's pointing out that we're not very good at asking good questions. And so like having real curiosity, making things interesting, that's actually way harder than anyone thinks that it is. So I'm actively working on a project where we're trying to do that with a reality capture scan of the city of Volterra in Italy. And what I found, and just trying to make it fun, even for myself, I was just like, I need to look at a whole bunch of other games and figure out like what made them cool. Because like the mechanics that make games fun, and like Fortnite, if you really try to study that like as a project to recreate, you'll realize there's a lot of little micro things in there that make it fun. And it's those micro expressions and interactions that you have with other people. And so AI actually can't help you with that. Right. Those are human to human based things. So it's like, what's going to be curious for Matt is not going to be exactly what's curious for me. And that's the fun of it. So I think trying to really gamify, like that's a very human thing. And so if you're thinking that, oh, maybe AI is going to make everything easier, that's wrong. But it is going to make some things easier for you to bring people on who are non-technical, who are way more fun than you. So I think that's kind of like my big hot take on it right now. Is like,
the creative and the critical thinkers still have a place.
They have a place for sure.
It's using the AI as a tool. And I think that's where we all got to realize that the more you master the tool, the more you will simplify and the more you'll be able to accomplish. But you're right. Try to get it to do math, try to get, certain personalization. Like you need a human to add that element.
My highest value skill right now is prompt engineering.
Yep.
Learning how to ask the right questions and then whittling it down.
And even when you have it, so like I use Copilot quite a bit for writing code. If you give Copilot the task of like writing an entire application for you, it's awful, that framework design, because that's a very human creative element of like, how do you bring all these abstract ideas together? But if you're a little beyond that and you're having Copilot help you wrap code up, or make sure that you're not writing bad code that's going to like interact poorly with the rest of your application, then it's amazing.
Copilot is great just for finding my damn files. Well, yeah.
Yeah, there's no doubt that AI is absolutely going to make us more productive. And there's all these niche applications that we have to be leveraging. Like some of our clients, I know Kyle, you and Em talked about it a little bit today, and Josh and I talked about it a bit last year, but one of the ones that gets me so excited just in terms of like reducing the cognitive load, saving time, more time on tools, productive time is, flying doing a UAV drone capture of, some inspection at height or whatever it might be, a congested area. And then rather than having, an operator, an inspector go rifle through, 4,000 photos in an hour and a half of video to find where there might be, inspection issues, corrosion, missing bolts, just run that through an AI algorithm. And, within less than an hour, you can just have all of those insights spit out with like a 99% confidence rate. So now that inspector has so much more productive time on his or her hands to go, be doing other inspections, training other people, whatever, leveraging the technology. So
on the right problems, right?
But that's but that's a double-edged sword too, because you're getting the productivity, which is great. But what happens when you bill out on productivity? Architects and engineers, you're screwed. There is a program right now called Spec GPT. And what it does, it writes specs based upon a machine learning way of, right now they have a little over 180,000 specs that that the machine is.
Was there a reality capture spec? I haven't found one.
City permit. Yeah.
This is a real deal. So when I was a pup, I was a really good spec writer. And one of my projects was in Mineola, New York. It was the regional headquarters for the Salvation Army. I wrote 3-part format spec, and I wrote deep into one of the sections, if you read this, call me and I will give you $100. I gave him my phone number. It was 1989, your phone calls. Right?
Wow.
No one reads specs.
It's true, though. It's very true, and it's scary, right?
Well, with Spec GPT, what it does is it goes in and it looks at your spec and will build it. I can write a spec in about, like let's say 100,000 square foot office building in suburban USA. Probably between 40 and 60 hours, I can get a good, and that's pretty quick, right? We challenged it with the specs that I just said, prompt engineering, 42 seconds. And it was about 90% complete. Now, if I were an architect, how do I bill out for 42 seconds and not 60 hours? So a lot of these things now are going to be coming to bite people back that they're not going to expect, because now what's your value? Is it writing specs, or is it being the professional that you should be as a designer?
It's a totally interesting one. I like to kind of flip that on its head to say that, from an owner operator perspective, you only have a certain amount of budget in a particular year, whatever asset you have. But what you want to do is a lot more than what you can do with that particular budget. So as you ultimately pull down that, that time spent from the contracting company, that's more time for them to do more work. So at the end of the day, us optimizing specs, building out the right specs is only going to get better data for all of us, which is going to be more truth, which means more truth means more time for us to trust. Or trust from us means more time to actually go spend out there and do more, capture more. There's a curve that once you get to like, I've captured everything in the world, I'm already done. Okay, and I can do that in seconds.
People that are going to hate this are the ones that make money off the inefficiencies.
Yes, which is I think that needs to be rooted out. Overall, most industries that needs to be rooted out, because that's just an aspect of how do we actually move forward together as owner operators and our suppliers and our engineering companies. I think that is that's a reality.
We've seen it over time and time again. Every industrial revolution, there've been manual processes that are replaced with automated processes, and people have to pivot or to go to different tasks that are going to be more valued because of the human nature of them. So it is coming. It will displace, or it will people will need to pivot, but I don't think you have just a spec writer that's only speccing that person if that's all they're doing. They're either going to write a lot more specs with the tools, or they may be looking for another.
Or it's going to expose certain groups that we just expect to be part of the supply chain of delivering a building. I can see general contracting going away in its current form. but maybe they still call themselves collab.
Something about that?
We were thinking the opposite.
He's going to put them in Unreal and make
The
them look like
definition of general contracting, maybe you become something else. Maybe you become like, AI, guru.
Yeah, we were kind of thinking on the other flip side of that is at some point in time, design, architectural engineering gets wrapped up into general contracting, and one way or the other, it's all going to merge.
It's an arm wrestle.
Architects will never go away.
Somebody will take it. So,
No, architects will never go away because someone needs someone to sue on a project.
yeah, okay, perfect.
Well, the real truth is lawyers aren't going to let any of you merge. There's way too much money to be made. And
Yeah. So,
question one.
yeah, question 1 is done. We're going to move on. No, that was great. I mean, when we're talking about all these ecosystems, I didn't really have to pose the questions because we naturally hit a little bit of everything. But as we move on, I do have a couple specific ones that I do want to hit. And this first one, I know we have maybe some diverse thoughts on this one, but it's something that a lot of people, users of this tech ask this question, right? So when we look at scanning and we look at modeling, we look at digital twins, there's always this conversation of scan first or only use the point cloud, or scan to BIM is a huge focus. There's a reason to have models. There's a reason to use data. There's cost associated with both. I want to hear a little bit of perspective on that. What is the current when it comes to why we model versus only use scan, or maybe what areas do we see scan starting to be able to be used, and not a model? Maybe we can hit a little bit of that.
So I think I could take.
You go for it.
You want to go?
Oh yeah. I guess I'll
go after you.
No worries. So we talked about reality first. That does not mean that we're not modeling. There's heavy modeling use cases. It all depends on the use case. If we're trying to capture a broad swath of what our assets look like, and we've got to go update it, we're going to reality capture it anyways. So if I'm out there reality capturing it, that is my visual source of truth at that point in time, or at least ever known truth at that point in time. But on the backside of that, I'm using that same data to go back and model on particular scenarios. What our focus is not that either one of them are better or worse. It's all about bringing everything into space and time. So we have to be able to combine those data sets so then we know reality at all points in times. And then the use cases are going to define whether I go back model it or I leave it as a scan or whatever it particularly would be.
Go ahead, Dustin.
Yep. I'm just going to tag right off of you that 100% agree that needs to be use case driven, especially for us as builders. We don't want to use tech just for the sake of tech. So it's got to have a very big purpose, and it lands even better, especially when the owner writes it into their spec and what they're expecting from a use case standpoint. So I think even more education there in which an owner can drive what the expectations are help a lot. But the use cases, we're trying to get very specific on matrixing that out. If it's for as-built, or do we need to recreate a model to provide to a design team? Are we using the reality capture for constructability reviews? Is it to drive quality or analyze safety? There's a lot of use cases, and it can get very confusing to individuals very quickly. So I think matrixing that all out in a way that's easily digestible helps a lot. So it's almost like a menu of use cases.
I realize. I mean, I think it should be use case based. I'm a little biased because we're a modeling company, so I'm gonna say always model. But I think the question is what to model.
Yep.
Because I think you always need a model, and it depends who is gonna use it. But I think the smart thing to do is just to ask a lot of questions and say, what do you want? Who's gonna be using this and what for, right? So it can be cost efficient as well.
What's your most common use case that you see from your company perspective?
So for as-built or for existing conditions, we do a lot of low LOD modeling, for coordination. So our clients, first of all, is like a fast modeling. So you can get a model really quick for them to start coordinating, because we normally get very late on the game. They call us when things go really bad and we need to scan very fast and deliver something that they can use, start clashing against. So we normally do base models like architecture, structure, very basic. And as they start coordinating with the structure, we can just go ahead, and do MEP with different level of details depending on who's going to use those. But I think that's the main thing, like, so you don't over model, because the risk there is our clients not incorporating the technology, right? Because it's too expensive, because it takes too long. I think that's the key.
It really depends on the amount of information you want to attach to the visualization, right? If I need visual information because I'm, understanding site conditions and I just want to understand the space, what's there, a 360 video is suffice for that. If I have materials and other elements that I have to consider, I need to have a container to hold that information in a logical way, where that's where the BIM is extremely valuable. It's all the information that you can organize spatially. And you can't quite do that with reality capture yet. We can tag things and whatnot, but it gets pretty tedious. And we're not at the point where you can take a laser scan and convert it into, a completely segmented object model.
I would argue that a little bit.
Get that quickly, but I mean, it depends on the complexity of your site, right?
I totally understand the aspect of it. There's constant improvement, but I'll say that I think we've found a way to do that in a way that is scalable. Does it hit every particular use case? No. So there is going to be this perfect world, and we're actually pushing for it pretty heavily, where we automatically segment, classify everything. And that's
it's coming.
It is
on it, yeah.
Way closer than you think it is.
There's no current silver bullet in the industry today. Like, if I could snap my fingers and ask for one thing, it would be automatic object segmentation in a point cloud. As it sits today, there are somewhat manual workflows. We do leverage AI/ML to enable a lot of that. And there's so many amazing industry partners that are working on advancing them. Like Kyle said, it's coming so soon. But in the meantime, I would argue it's quite a bit more cost effective and less labor intensive and more scalable to tag those unique identifiers onto your point cloud, or your mesh, whatever it is, and enrich that data. Even if you have a CAD model and you're not sure that it's 100% as built, even if it's an IFC, how often are they 100%? Bring in that metadata, tie it to your point cloud, and then in a lot of circumstances, and this is risky, I have to a lot of CAD people here, but you can essentially toss that model out if you don't have any, major projects, upgrades. You're going to be remodeling that stuff anyway, but you can over model, you can overscale.
So I want to keep going on this topic because, right, the industry's growing, the scanning needs are growing, modeling is growing. So everybody wants to know, right? Like, okay, what team should we be investing in building? Is someone going to keep modeling? Is it more using the point cloud data? So even if, let's say that silver bullet comes through in the next 2, 3, 4 years, that automatic segmentation of point cloud, there is the use of that segmented point cloud, but what use cases will there still be for needing the model? So if we're doing a renovation, if we're using it for construction, if we're, doing pipe design, will the need for going from scan to model always remain?
So I think one way you can answer this question is by looking at another common argument of 2D CAD versus BIM.
Yeah, that's a good...
Right? And it's like, CAD is still just as important than ever. And Autodesk would hate to tell you what their actual revenue numbers are of just plain Jane AutoCAD. And I can't tell you, but I know the number, and I can tell you it's significant. And the reason it's significant is because that verb, that action of drafting, still has a place. Still has a place in construction, still has a place in manufacturing. It still has a place where you need to do that activity. So I think the question of will you ever not need a model? No, you will always need a model.
We still have tape measures.
Yeah.
Yes.
If it's the verb, those verbs for those types of things and the way it solves certain problems, I think those problems will exist forever. The thing that's interesting, though...
So you're saying we're doomed?
Oh, no. I'm saying things are just going to stay interesting.
Yeah.
But I think we can overcomplicate it, though, because there's two scenarios. You can take a point cloud, you can segment it, layer it, and I'm just speaking in terms of, say, for clash detection. You can do all that, segment, layer, run the clash detection, run your deviation report, and come up with 100 or 1,000 issues. But really, the scenario B is okay, well, maybe just fly the model and look for the constructability issues and tag the top 10 instead of spending all this energy to do all this when you could just walk the model and look for the issue. We don't need to do all that when you can just look at it. Right.
Yeah.
So sometimes I think we venture in making things unnecessarily more complicated to arrive at what was really important, which is 10 top issues, not a bunch of clashes that would get resolved in coordination anyways.
Right.
But
Yeah, I
It
think
comes
the
down
big
to the use
industry,
case, right? Like utilities are a good one. Sorry, like bring it up. Like automatic segmentation has been around for a decade, using utilities in large scale areas. I wouldn't want to try to model that. You either have an Esri map or you can use a point cloud, and you can do a good job with that. But if I have tens of thousands of attributes that I want to push up and contain in a building, like good luck doing that with a point cloud anytime soon. It's going to be way too difficult to containerize all that information, at least today. I do believe it's coming, but I'm not quite sold yet. And then you got to think about just the navigation. There's all sorts of elements there.
Yeah.
So I think the both are going to be there.
Yep.
It'll be depending on what you're trying to do. And also, the other thing about laser scanning and reality capture is that it's not the engineering record. And it's the CAD that's the stamp file. Until that changes, it's always going to be there. So I don't know at what point we're going to start thinking about the record being reality capture. I'm kind of questioning that a little bit about why that might, how could that change, or will it ever change?
I do have to take it back over just because of time.
Oh,
So I know. Look, this is a fun topic.
that was like living a
Just getting
cliffhanger.
I know. But look, I'm gonna get in trouble at my own event if we don't get off in time. No. Well, I just want to give a little chance. I really enjoyed for the first panel letting everyone get one last word in. I think this is an important topic. I think I wish I asked that question earlier, because everybody wants to keep talking about this one. That being said, I do think really the summarizing is like, in the short term, both are absolutely needed. They're going to keep scaling. We need more resources in both. Scan to model, people who know how to use the data, people who know how to capture the data, because as the devices are coming faster, cheaper, the people who have the assets to scan want more of it. And I truly think we still do not have enough resources today to produce the work that is going to be desired in the next 5 years. I really don't think so. You look at the amount of assets around the world, the people who want to capture those, who's going to go to all of those facilities and scan them nonstop. We have to bring in more people. So as we wrap up, let's just let each person give their last thought on this topic, but you can't go more than
10 seconds.
20 seconds. We'll start here.
So I'll end it on that particular piece. I think it's not the battle between the two. It's this aspect of how do we make sure all of them come together as one, and we like to call it come together as one in space and time. But that's honestly the industry challenge: is how do you understand what is true no matter what you captured. Whether it's one of these things in XR, or a digital twin, reality capture, BIM modeling, we need to make it more human, right? It needs to be easy to be able to understand what is reality, what's not, what model do I have at what particular stage, and that's it. So it's definitely use case specific on reality capture versus BIM, but you need to understand how to manage it in time and space.
I think the answer is yes, definitely we should model, but we should be very conscious on what to model and for what. And just a quick recap of my conversation with Dustin last night is like, we were talking about modeling for digital twinning. And when you get requests like 500 level of detail, you're like, do you need nuts and bolts for the structure? No. Do you rebar? No. What do you need? It's not just an FM model, right?
Oh, yeah.
Maybe it's just LOD 200 with data. That's enough. And we don't spend that much time. So.
Yeah, that's always been a big one.
What's the use case?
What is the LOD?
There's a lot of confusion in our industry right now.
Yeah.
So I think the spaces are like awesome for, having this type of conversations and, spread what we have learned.
Yep. Hopefully we're providing more clarity.
LOT, the Achilles heel of reality capture.
All right, Dustin.
So for me, all the things that we're talking about, what I notice, and I go to schools a lot, elementary, high school, colleges, and we present and show what we do. And there's a common theme that I see that happens is we get asked to come back right away. Like, please come back. Please, there's what I see as a desperate need in the educator system for tools and resources and people that can speak to technology, especially construction technology. And I think that's what keeps me up at night is, are we investing in these individuals in these young people to understand these things and equip our schools. I think our government agencies can probably do a lot better job in investing in these kind of things. So learning and education, I think, is a huge thing that, really needs investment.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, one thing that just kind of came to me here is when you look at the CAD industry or physical modeling, even in that, that stand the test of time. You could put it in a file cabinet. You could pull it out to paper. It's physical and tangible. What do we do with the point cloud that you scanned 30 years ago? How are you going to open it? How are you going to share it? How are you going to read it? So I think there's a lot of this. We need to figure out what the long term is going to be because these companies come and go. These interfaces are going to come and go. Are we going to be able to even use the data 20 years in? So I think there's a lot of unknowns that we don't know where a CAD and a BIM is still going to be a staple. And that's why it's the engineering record for construction today. But I think we need to get our brains wrapped around, well, what next? I can't take a million pictures and try to make sense of it from JPEGs. I need a software to do that for me today.
Yeah. The Unreal Game Engine. I'll close on a couple of things. One is going to be like a segue to what I'm going to talk about on Thursday. And so I'm co-presenting with Neil from Wade Trim, and we're talking, and we actually met last year at this RCN event. And what's interesting about what we're going to talk about is how you start a digital strategy. And so last year I presented, a lot of people talk about strategy, but most people actually haven't experienced one. And that was certainly true of my case growing up in corporate culture at like HOK and Stantec. We would have plans. We didn't actually have strategies. And so having your strategy for each one of these topics, or modeling versus LiDAR scanning versus what you're going to do for managing data, strategy is your first step. And so in that, term alignment is a really big thing, because your terms for how you define within your organization are going to be different against other organizations. And that's correct. That's how it should be. So every strategy is bespoke to you and your organization, what you're trying to achieve. And I think the thing that makes you stay present with all of these different topics is joining different groups like RCN for reality capture, which is now broadening with the committees. And if you haven't checked that out, that's also going to be something you can participate in. But digital twins, there's the Digital Twin Consortium. AR, XR is the Augmented Reality, Virtual Reality Association. And AI, there's too many to count because half of them are being run by fake agents. So it's all of that is a good use of your time, but you need to kind of pick where you're going to just try to ride ideas and conversations, because that's the only way you can keep up with it.
Totally agree on both of those notes. And I think we were talking backstage about a little bit of healthy friction. And obviously it feels like this group could sit up here and talk for the next 6 hours and still be happily arguing. So I think to Bray's point, it is so important to stay engaged. There's so much technology that's consistently evolving. We have to keep asking the questions, keep knocking heads about things, and just helping each other move forward, because without friction, there's no progress. And I also wanted to build off of what you said a little bit about strategy being, the foundation to how you're going to, what your deployment looks like and how you're going to implement these technologies. And I completely agree with that. I will add on something that I have a lot of fun working with our clients on is, yes, have a long-term strategy, knowing that it's going to be changing as things evolve and you have learnings and you have to learn from your users. But you also have to start by focusing on one big pain point. What is something that you need a solution to today that you can, set KPIs, start tracking? Do you need to reduce your maintenance order backlog? Start there and watch how it builds out. And you can really, start implementing these technologies, look to solution providers, work with the ecosystem. But yeah.
So thanks for putting this group together. I love the title of this called The Ecosystem of Reality Capture Digital Twins, XR and AI. So I encourage you to stay for the next 30 minutes as I try to encapsulate this into the world of the metaverse.
There you go. Thank you, guys.
Good job, guys.